Hello, everybody. Welcome. All right. Hello. We're going to get started in a couple minutes. We're just going to let everybody in. But as you can see from hopefully the slide, you are in the right place. Today is the Nexl and Wilson Allen One Firm Webinar, Data Science, Law Firm Revenue, the Basics. I am very excited to be sitting down with James Baldassarra, the VP of Data Science at Wilson Allen. James, good afternoon.
Hey, Ben. Great to be here. Looking forward to getting into some pretty interesting stuff on the subject.
Absolutely, yeah. So we're going to just wait a couple more minutes. I see we have some people entering, very excited. While I think we wait, James, do you how's things on the other side today of the pond? A great day here in Chicago. You wanna talk about the weather while we let everybody come in?
And say, well, I'm British, so I'm very used to weather. We get like one month for summer, and that's about it. It's actually really cold here today. Like I think it hit like -4 for us overnight, which might as well be like -30. We don't deal with it very well. But yeah, grey, miserable, starting to get dark. So this is uplifting.
It is uplifting. I was just telling James that I love doing these one firm webinars because when I get to talk to cool people like James, and then also, you know, I get the excitement of doing something live and sitting down with everybody. I feel a little bit like maybe right before a rocket launch. So there we go. Some excitement to uplift because I can't even see downtown Chicago right now, and I live in downtown, so that's how bad the fog is today. So a little bit gray, but we hope while we're waiting, we hope everybody. Evan from Kwasara says hello from Nairobi, Kenya. Wow, I would love to hear if everybody wants to put in the chat where you're from. I would love to hear where everybody's from, and also what's the weather like? Because there's nothing like the weather, you know. And we have everybody from all around the world, and maybe you can uplift, and maybe James and I can live vicariously through you all. Okay, we're gonna wait just one more minute and let everybody in, but I am joined today by James Baldassarra, the VP of Data Science at Wilson Allen. I'm just going to ask James in a few moments to give his background. Let's see. We're actually getting a couple responses. Let's see where everybody is from. And then I was just going to say I'm joined today by Emma as well, who is our event marketer here at Nexl. I'm going to do a couple ground rules before kicking off, but let's see where everybody's from while we just wait. All right, we have Nairobi, Kenya. We have Penhead, Surrey, VVV Cold from Victoria. Yes. Hi from Amsterdam. Few sunny days in the week. All right. Seattle, seemingly gray from Aaron Pedersen. Hello from snowy Newcastle. Hello, Ben and James. Origami here. Oh, how's it going? From foggy Chicago. St. Paul. Great to see you. Dylan, we have some coming in. Costa Rica, wow, cold and windy in Costa Rica. Sunny, but cold and windy. Dylan from NYC, great to see everybody. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and get started. I'm gonna kick this off very quickly, but just some ground rules. First, you are at the live webinar. So that means two things. One, you get the privilege of, or we get the privilege of answering your questions live. Really excited. Thank you for being here. I know James and I appreciate talking data science with others. If you do have a question, just go ahead and put it in the chat. And Emma, who is our event marketer here at Nexl, will stop James and I if something is burning and that we definitely need to answer. Otherwise, we're going to reserve about 10 minutes at the end for some open Q&A. So please stick around. And the second is, if you got to leave early, we totally get it. If you want to go enjoy a sunny day outside and data science is just not doing it for you, we totally understand. You will all be receiving a recording post-webinar. And I think that's it. Emma, am I forgetting anything? Anything else?
Nope, that's everything.
Fantastic. Okay, so with that, let's go ahead and kick off. 5 minutes in data science, law firm and law firm revenue, the basics. I am joined today by James Baldassarra, the VP of Data Science at Wilson Allen. James, it is a pleasure to have you here today. with me.
Thanks, Ben. It's actually really great to be here. It's a subject that I've found over the last couple of years has gained massive traction, especially in legal. And I think there are some very interesting things emerging, and firms are really starting to take advantage of it. So looking forward to getting into it.
I am as well. So why don't we start a little bit with your bio, how life has led you to be the VP of data science and much more at Wilson Allen, and talk a little bit maybe about Wilson Allen. I know Wilson Allen just had a very successful acquisition and merger. So get into a little bit of what's relevant. Let us know how you got into data science and all the rest of it.
Yeah, cool. So, I mean, interestingly, my background is law or legal data, I should say. I've been involved in law firms one way or another my entire career. Began working in-house, specifically within finance, and sort of moved into systems and data from that. Joined a startup a very long time ago now. I think I was employee number one. We grew that, and we were acquired by, if anyone knows Big Hand, we were acquired by Big Hand. And my background has been building BI, building pricing tools, leveraging legal data, pretty much, like I say, my entire career. And, Wilson Allen for me has always been one of those sort of companies that I've had one eye on as a vendor. Certainly when I was in-house, as well as when I was a competing vendor. And they had a bit of a reputation for just doing things well. And I've known some people there for a long time, and the opportunity came up to begin looking at establishing a practice that is about data science and modern analytics as law firms migrate to a different way of doing things. And it gave me an opportunity to build on what I already knew, but do it in a different way, and do it, I guess, multiplied, with more information, more data, better insight, better output. So, I really sort of saw the opportunity as I still see it, which is massive. And I think, my role here at this point is to help socialize data science and modern analytics with my clients. Lots of them are steeped in traditional technology, traditional ways of analyzing information, often from one data source. And my job is really about bringing the opportunities that modern analytics provides us, and helping law firms understand what they can do as they are going through these huge migrations at the same time. So really exciting stuff. Wilson Allen itself as a business is changing, has changed dramatically, is now a part of a kind of a funding group where we have some big names in there. You'll probably see it in my background. We've got LAC, we've got HBR Consulting. I think the intersection of HBR Consulting and the work that I do from a tech services or a solution services perspective is very compelling. And we're, like I say, the practice is relatively new at WA, but it's gained significant traction within the sort of year or so I've been here. And I don't see that changing. I think, if anything, I talk about it more now than I ever have. So long may that continue.
Long may that continue, indeed, unlike the gray weather, which hopefully that part's very, very soon. Sorry, just bringing that full circle back here. Okay, well, we have a very exciting webinar. We're going to go through 3 main points. And again, we're going to start with the basics here. Wilson Allen and James are great partners to Nexl. We're going to have probably a series of these webinars specifically around insights, data, all the rest of it over the course of this year. But today we're going to start with the basics. So if you are a newbie here, just like I am on data science and the data science and the intersection of that and revenue and law firm data specifically, don't worry. We're going to go step by step. We're starting at the beginning here. So 3 points. Hopefully everybody can see this agenda. The first, I'm going to ask James to go a little bit into how does law firm data, revenue, and data science intersect. So that's really going to frame this up. The 3 main components, let's say, or the Venn diagrams, if you're a visual thinker. From there, we're going to go into what are the actual insights, data in, insights out, right? What can you get? What kind of revenue insights can you actually get from data science? And then the last is, where are we going with law firm data science? And James is going to bless the space with a little bit of forecasting. I'm sure it's going to be absolutely correct. And that's one of the great things about data science, right? It actually allows you to forecast in some way. So stick around. We're going to do about 35 minutes here, and we're going to go through each one of those three. So let's go ahead and get started. But before that, we are going to just set this up a little bit in terms of where are we today. Let's zoom out. And this is just going to be a really brief introduction for James to kind of go into the first question. So all of this is pretty well known where we're at today in the legal world. 2008, that watershed moment, a lot of things changed for law firms over the course of the last 15 years, give or take. Really, law firms have had an unequal recovery. Some have done exceptionally well. I think we all know those law firms who are making more revenue and more profit than ever before, even though they're few and far between. Others have really never bounced back in any significant way. At the same time, when we look at financial health, and this is from Thomson Reuters' own financial indexing, really law firms are have been very stagnant. Of course, in the early part of the pandemic, we saw a big uptick. But as we came into 2022, the financial data was a little bit sour in terms of their health. Now, many law firms have seen the writing on the wall with the idea that they might have to reimagine how they go to market to keep financial health. Over the course of the last, again, 15 years, law firms have done a fair number of initiatives to try to get them back into this place. Some of them have created client service teams, the rise of CRMs and business development training. You have client-facing professionals coming into the profession more so than ever before and actually intersecting with those. And of course, updated marketing strategies on top of the tried and true strategies that law firms have always gone to. And of course, law firms are continuing to start to think about what other levers can they start to pull in this quote unquote new normal to really get them back into pre-2008 or even continue to thrive in this quote unquote new normal. And with that, one of those is really data and the idea around data and how data, revenue, and data science can really be a force multiplier. So James, with that, I think we're going to sort of get into the first topic. Before we do, any reflections? You know, you've been in the industry for a very long time. Any reflections on that sort of pre-frame? Anything that stood out to you?
No, I think, to be honest, I think it resonates for why there's an appetite for data. You know, I think most industries outside of legal recognize the power of it and have taken steps to kind of consume it and you know, drive action and decision making from it. They actually are data driven, to coin a phrase. And I think, like everything, the more pressure you put an industry under, you know, the more it looks for opportunities to do things in a different way. And I think you know, the rise of additional software, and we'll get into this in a minute, and the richness of data that's now available to law firms that maybe wasn't there before is the reason why data has become such an important factor in all of this. They genuinely see it as giving them the competitive edge.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. So yeah, data and data science as an intersection in a practice is really being driven by a lot of pressure. That's kind of the TLDR. So why don't we get into the first question here? How does law firm data, and what are we talking about law firm data when we talk law firm data, revenue and data science intersect in this beautiful little Venn diagram that brings everything together?
Yeah, so I think it's interesting, right? So data science isn't new. It's been around for a long while. Yes, it's becoming increasingly popular, and you know, the legal industry is now really looking at it as a discipline, and in many cases as its own, I guess, department or practice group. You know, as law firms strive to innovate. But you know, I think when you think about data and you think about revenue for law firms, historically it was pretty simple. You know, financial business intelligence as a concept is mature. It's been around for a long while. I'd say it's pretty red ocean actually in terms of, the vendors that are out there that do it. And there's nothing wrong with it. Like, it does its job. But I think it's only descriptive, right? When you think about analytics, it only tells you what's happened. Now, in some cases, they have forecasting mechanisms within them. But again, they're only really taking past PMS-driven information, and they're trying to project that into the future to give you a view on how you might perform, right? And I think that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But as you think about data science, it kind of thrives on depth and variety of data. And when we work as a group, we want as many features that are relevant to us from many different data sources as part of the models that we develop, right? And I guess that, for me, like, law firms are now interested in truly understanding the work that they do for their clients. They want to understand more about the talent and the connections, to go back to your point about relationship intelligence between the people they have in their firm as staff and the people that they know amongst their clients. And I think when you start to combine those data points, actually the output's pretty powerful. Now, I think there's a few factors that make this possible where it wasn't possible before. And maybe I mentioned before about this rise of new technology that's actually everywhere all of a sudden, right? So you've got, starting with CRMs, historically, and I don't need to tell you this, but historically CRMs were largely Rolodexes, right? And required lawyers to constantly say what they were doing, and no lawyer ever did it. Right. And now we have this rise of scraping technology that's everywhere that kind of takes out the need for the individuals to be entering this information. It's kind of capturing it in the background. So suddenly it's incredibly relevant, and it's actually of good quality, which is a huge factor in any of this. You then have ERM software that's exploding, relationship intelligence, right? So it's like who knows who. And it's not just who knows who in the firm, it's who knows who outside the firm. It's connecting the dots, it's looking for the white space, right? And I think the rise of those pieces of kit add the contextual data points that we may want to combine with financial measures of success to indicate how we might drive more revenue, or we may look for white space, or we may be able to invest the right effort in the right client, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that's a factor. The other thing that's obviously, pretty much driving this along for me is this rise of cloud acceptance amongst the legal industry. Maybe 3 or 4 years ago, cloud was a bit of a dirty word, right? And people were kind of, well, we're not going there. But actually, the majority are already there in some way or another, and are going to continue to go there. And if you look at the software that a lot of people are providing, they're predominantly cloud-based anyway. So once you remove a barrier to cloud and you start thinking about the data that you, I guess, generate, store, and want to consume, and you think about that from we'll say big data, but it's not big data in the same way as it would be for banking, but we'll say it's big data. And you look at the cloud alternatives to data storage and data movement and consumption, all those things, actually all of this becomes a little bit easier. I'm not saying there's no silver bullet here, but it's certainly a lot easier than how we used to design analytical solutions, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It makes perfect sense. So what I really heard, and I'll play it back to you, make sure that I got it all. What I really heard is, there's been a revolution in terms of both what law firms have come to understand and want to get to know. And this was your point about 360. Many law firms are starting to want to know more about the client, more about the relationship than ever before. So you have this appetite, probably driven by the idea of, hey, if we know more, we can drive more revenue. That's one part. And then the second is just the technology layer or the capture layer, really making all of this possible. And then the final is those two contributing factors have kind of fed into data science as a practice that you exercise as a data science Jedi to really sort of bring all of these three things together and provide the insights for law firms. Is that kind of a good summary of where we're at?
I think that's fair. I think the important thing to remember with data science is it's broad, right? It's a massive topic, and there are huge I guess, verticals within it, and they're all important for various reasons. But when I talk about data science and I talk about data science at law firms, I really am talking about modern analytics, right? I'm talking about consuming and holistically storing the data that you have built systems to kind of generate this information somewhere that you can do something with it, right? And that might be, to begin with, making information available to your CMO or your BD team to better understand the relationships that you have, to better understand which factors may contribute towards a client having a longer shelf life with you, all of these things, just arming them with the information they didn't have before. And then you go beyond that once you're comfortable with that layer of intelligence, and you start to look at how can we develop machine learning models that may find insight for us or look for correlation that we didn't know existed. And it just helps build out the theory, and you just continually get into this cycle of refinement. But I think end to end, it's a huge journey, right? I think you summarized it well, that rise of new software, that understanding of why they need the data and the technology to support the concepts that we talk about. They've all joined together at probably the perfect time.
Yeah, totally. So that gets us, I think, into our next topic, which is really the type of insights that you can derive from data science, specifically within law firm. And I want to ask you, I don't know if anybody, so first of all, I'll just preface this by saying, if you don't follow Wilson Allen on LinkedIn, please go ahead and follow it. They have tremendous content about understanding data science. And I think it was Wilson Allen, one of them, it was a little carousel that really helped you understand the difference between the type of insights that you can get, which is you already touched on it in your previous answer, which is descriptive. Then there's prescriptive or forecasting, and then the last is kind of insights or recommendations around. So before you answer this question, is that right? Did I get that right in terms of when we think about the categories of things we can even get insights into? It's almost like backwards looking currently, and then what is going to happen. Is that a fair way to sort of talk about these things sometimes?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think you kind of tend to end up with descriptive, which looking back, you have predictive, which is kind of what will happen. And then you have kind of things like prescriptive, which is, what can I do to influence the predicted outcome? Right. So I think the holy grail for anyone is trying to get to a point where they can actually review what's happening, look at what will happen, and then have data suggest what they should do to impact that outcome. That's the holy grail for anyone.
Totally.
Now that isn't necessarily easy, but that's where everyone's trying to get to, and I think a lot of the time we've sat as an industry between descriptive and predictive, but we are moving up that curve.
Yeah, totally. Okay, so that's a great framing. And again, follow Wilson Allen on LinkedIn, please. Lots of great content coming out of WA. So let's get into what revenue insights can you actually derive from data science. And again, starting from the basics, where are we at? What kind of stuff can we really do here?
Okay, well, I'll tell you what. I'll give you some examples of some of the stuff we've been doing, because I think it kind of gives you a nod towards where we're headed. But the answer is, and this is what I've found, right? Like sitting down with a CMO or BD team, marketing team, whatever, and just saying to them, this is the information you have. A lot of them have hunches about what they would like to explore as it relates to data and how they can drive revenue. Like they kind of know their business. They don't know for sure, but they know their business and they have an idea. And what I find interesting with data science is it's I guess experimental by definition. So sometimes we sit down with these people and we're like, you've got a hunch, let's try and prove it one way or the other. And actually they form the best entry points for this stuff. But taking a step back, like I'll talk about some of the stuff we have done, but I think it's worth mentioning that because a lot of people have ideas and think, how am I going to prove that this is right or not? And I think data science is exactly there for that. But to get some tried and tested things that we have worked on in the past, right? One of the first things we did was client clustering. And what I mean by that is using algorithms essentially to group clients based on a set of identified features. So if I take a step back, we were looking at our clients as a business and we were saying, well, okay, what to us makes them a performing customer, right? What across the board is a series of features or metrics that to us indicate a good performance for as a customer to us. And what we were able to do is essentially take a cross-section of data points from our practice management system, our relationship intelligence, our opportunity tracking, so CRM, even our NPS scoring, right? So what do they actually think of us? And basically cluster our clients into, we gave them 4 separate clusters, I guess, or groups. And they were kind of things like, we had best performing clients, we had emerging clients, we had declining clients, and this is controversial, but in some cases we had bad fit clients, where we're investing a ton of effort here and we're just not getting the return, right? So sometimes it's good to know that. And I guess when it comes to revenue and directing, I mean, this was largely targeted at CMOs deciding how they want to invest their time in developing key client programs, as an example. Our outcome there was trying to 2 things. One, we wanted to know who our best performing clients were, and the second one, we wanted to understand how we could bring an emerging client into our best performing client category, right? And the other output there was understanding how we might divest effort if we needed to, right? And they're all important factors, right? No one has time and money to invest in relationships that aren't necessarily going anywhere if you can understand that you've done all you can. So I think there's more there. Like, I think we have a vision to bring like a time series into that at some point to understand and track the targeted effort over time to see whether we can or cannot influence which cluster these businesses sit in. But that's just one example of what we've been doing. The second piece that's pretty obvious to everyone is the white space analysis, right? I don't think this is new. Like, traditionally, if you ask someone about white space traditionally, it would have been which practice groups are engaged with a particular client and which ones aren't, right? We kind of started to blend that information with, I guess, kind of our relationship intelligence. And the idea there was to understand the interconnectivity between the talent that we have as a business, or our law firms have as a business, and the client, to see how that combines and how we could drive kind of like a more fuller spectrum of services from a delivery standpoint. So it's really just, in that case, it's still white space analysis, but it's just understanding, okay, so these PGs aren't necessarily working with the client, but who does the client know within our firm, right? Is there a hidden relationship there that we're not exploiting? Is there something we could be targeting there? So again, it's about blending information. That's not necessarily, I guess, as data sciencey as client clustering, because no algorithms are really used, but we still like to understand that. I think another example, I call it land and expand. And one of the things that clients are asking a lot of us is, which features impact the likelihood of a client landing with a firm and expanding their relationship to use more services, right? It's like, what pattern or what can we do? What features indicate the best chance of this client becoming bigger for us, right? And again, every law firm's different. Everyone comes up with their own set of features. But what I love about data science is we're able to establish correlation. We're able to say, okay, these particular features do impact this. Right? And to be honest, you can say it within a certain level of statistical certainty, right? Like, that's the point. And, right. And you can establish a baseline and then introduce and I guess remove features that are not relevant and bring in new ones and tweak it to a point where you can have a pretty good vision of actually what does make a difference to a client and your ability to grow them. I think the other couple of things that have really been interesting to me over the last year or so actually is there's an increasing focus, and I don't think this is surprising given the current economic climate, on protecting relationships and the associated revenue. Right? That's huge at the moment. Everyone wants to understand or evaluate the risk of a client leaving. And, I won't say that there's no one size fits all here. Everyone does it slightly differently. But most law firms have relationship partners or people who are responsible for, key clients, both from a front office facing and a back office facing perspective. But intelligence now includes, I guess, machine learning driven scoring, like that is presented to the people that manage these relationships. And it can be all sorts of things. It can take into account NPS feedback. It can take into account, financial performance, whereby it could be, suddenly we're writing off tons of time here we never were before. Is that impacting the relationship negatively? There's a ton of different things you can look at to establish the risk of someone leaving. But the point is, we're creating a risk score and we're making it available to our consumers as part of a 360-degree view of a client. And when you're talking about protecting the revenue or growing the revenue, I think knowing the risk of losing it is incredibly important. And again, it's just another example. And there's something that I thought about as you were talking, from the introduction where you were talking about kind of financial crisis and how that impacts performance and what it does to law firms. We actually did a piece of work a long while ago that basically looked to, establish or confirm, highlight, whatever, the increased time it took to collect cash post-financial crisis. So it's about understanding what external factors economically can do to your law firm's KPIs. And we've recently just redone that piece of work for kind of the pandemic and stuff like that. And more often we are being asked to include external data or publicly available data alongside the firm's own information or own generated data. And there's some interesting stuff you can do with that when you pull it together. They're just two examples of kind of what we did with that. So I guess what I'm talking about here is like when we talk about data and we talk about data science, and I go back to it, data science loves variety and it loves depth. In just those handful of examples there, we're talking about data from practice management systems, CRMs, MarTech, ERM, experience, risk and compliance, even existing BI platforms, external public data sets. The point is we can do it, and we couldn't do it historically. So, that's what really excites me here.
Yeah, it's incredibly exciting. Let me one reflection, and then I want to pose a question specifically around this. So the reflection is, at Nexl we talk a lot about our revenue flywheel being really driven by three key factors. The first is retaining clients longer, and I think you really spoke about this. And what I heard is that there's a particular revenue insight that can come out of retaining or how to retain clients. The second is expanding, of course. It's always easier to sell another piece of work to a client. And I also heard some expansion type insights that could come out of this. And then the last was acquisition and acquiring new clients. And I heard a little bit about white space analysis. So I just, I want to pose that back. Whenever you were speaking, I saw very clearly this three-part revenue flywheel that we sort of think about a lot. And it's just great to know that, to your point now, because we have the data and because we're capturing that data, you can really start to feed in. So it's more than just a hunch, right? You can really bring this idea of insights on actually what to do in the right time, in the right space. So that's just a reflection. Now, the question that I want to ask is around, and I know that you'll get this, which is institutionalizing data. I think it's not a question about data science, but it's really a question about data, which is we have a lot of lateral movement and a lot of succession planning going on in the industry right now. I think it's very subtle, but I'd like for you to speak on it, which is, by instituting the data and bringing it in and capturing it within law firms, there's kind of a, for lack of a better word, this is how you make sure that the knowledge management and the data is and the insights are really captured for everybody, regardless of the lateral movement or the succession planning. And just until about 5 years ago, that really wasn't that capable, right? Because the platforms, the data, et cetera, wasn't there. Can you talk a little bit about why that's so important? It's probably obvious why it's so important, but just how much it's now possible to kind of hold and institutionalize that data over the course of the next 20, 30, or even looking backwards and getting into that. Does that make sense, that question?
No, it does. I think it's important as well because we talk about all of this that we're talking about here is kind of like the end state, right? Like it's what you can do with information once you are, as a business, culturally accepting of data. But there's a lot of firms out there that think they're culturally accepting of data, but when you talk about all your data, that completely changes. And the need for governance, the need for ownership, the need for understanding availability, all of these things suddenly become, I guess, the foreground for anything that we do. And if I guess the way it used to be managed internally was everyone would be responsible for their own data source, and ultimately they were responsible for providing a blinkered view of that data source, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. It worked. But when we start talking about the need to combine information, or certainly the option to combine it, then silos break down, right? Like, and walls break down, and suddenly everyone needs to play nicely, right? And that's for me. There's two parts to I guess the answer to your question. I think, well, at least my thinking. I don't necessarily know it's the answer, but I think culturally, technology. You can buy technology to do anything, right? But culturally, you need to assess yourselves and understand how you can, I guess, institutionalize the use of data within your business, right? And that's all the soft stuff, and it needs to happen. And I wrote a blog on the subject a while back, which largely you just said that you can buy all the technology in the world, but if the business isn't operationally set up or ready to really make use of the information it has, it's going to fall. It's never going to be adopted. It's not going to work, right?
Right.
I think as it relates to ensuring that people understand the insight that you're delivering, there's technology that captures that sort of thing. We spend a great deal of time talking about purview and MDM and all those kind of concepts, right? Like properly defining a business's taxonomy that can historically change as the business does. And that includes defining KPIs and metrics and insight that's derived from data science and all these things. That's all important. And absolutely is becoming more and more important. And that I think is why there's a lot of these software solutions out there that exist literally to capture that layer.
Yeah, exactly.
But I do think, as I say, I think that is probably why there's a rise in, the CDO roles that are starting to pop up everywhere. Chief data officers are turning up everywhere. You have, I've seen all sorts, head of insights, chief of insights. I'm seeing all sorts of roles pop up, and it's kind of, I guess it's kind of like a blend of CIO and operational and analytics are kind of all coming together, right? And I mean, I think you need a baseline, and a lot of these firms don't have it. But I think once you have that baseline, there's tools and technology and cultural changes and processes that can help ensure that survives as you move forward as a firm.
Yeah, I love it. I love the insight of baselines as a force multiplier of change. That's very interesting. All right, so let's go to our last question, which is, where are we going with law firm collaboration data science, and what's sort of on the horizon? And please talk about everything as expansive as possible, and also sort of what's maybe the cutting edge of what's being done today with some of the clients within the law firms that Wilson Allen and you are working with.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think what do I see happening here? I think more often, like the more and more I speak to our clients, the more and more I'm recognizing that data scientists as a role is something that's becoming more common in law firms. Now, I think I say that caveated on the basis that a lot of people ran out to hire data scientists, but don't necessarily set themselves up operationally well enough to feed that data scientist with work to do. So whilst I think law firms are going to continually keep hiring data scientists, and I think it will become as common as having a reporting team within a law firm, I think in the short term, I see it being very much a fractional resource or outsourced service while law firms get their head around what they need to do to, I guess, operationalize that function within the firm. So I think that's the first thing I see. I think there is a huge change to the way that law firms, I guess, store information. And I think it's partially driven by the fact that lots of law firms are now selecting cloud vendors for their software. In some cases, that data is being hosted and you have access via an API. In some cases, it's just a lift and shift and actually you have access to it. The point is that when we talk about a siloed data estate for a law firm, because they're all siloed for the most part, by migrating to the cloud, what have you actually changed? The reality is you've probably just siloed all of your information in the cloud, and in some cases you've probably got less access to that data than you had when it was on premise. And I think one of the things that a lot of people are starting to come to realize is that actually you need to holistically store this within your own tenant in some way, in some form. And I think enter the lake, right? Like, I'm not suggesting that the lake, the lake's interesting, but I think people shouldn't over egg it. The lake is a storage platform, right? What you lay on top of the lake is what's interesting. How you transform information is what makes it interesting. But it is a really good place to land information, and it's scalable and it's economical, right? So I think you're going to see people starting to think about that as a concept. Because once you do that, this appetite for data amongst law firms isn't changing. I think the understanding of analytics and the maturity within the people that are coming into law firms is growing, and is growing at a pace that I've never seen before. They need access to information, and without establishing that holistic landing zone for information and governance around it, you've got a lot of people trying to knock down the fence, and you're not really ready to knock down the fence, right? So I think you need to think. I think that's going to be something that changes hugely, and I think there isn't a single strategic document that I have seen over the last year that doesn't have using data to gain a competitive edge in some way presently. Right. So that people understand that, they understand the need of it. I think, for me, the other thing I'm seeing, and I think I'm going to continue to see, is the rise in data-driven marketing and BD activity. There are so many tools out there that give us insight into buying signals, into, relationships, into, what we do, what people are buying, what they're searching for. That, you can get access to information from a whole host of things. And I think all that's going to do, that's just going to get smarter. That's not going anywhere. I think. So what do I think? I think, to top it off, I think you're going to see a lot more products incorporating machine learning output into their product. Right. I think people love the idea that a tool can do a job for them, but I think they also have come to expect. They've come to expect a level of analytics or insight from the information they're feeding it. And I think that's going to be something that a lot of vendors are going to start to think about more heavily.
Awesome. So this is what I got. So the first is on the one hand, you see sort of a cultural revolution whenever it comes within law firms around the fact that we're going to have better defined data science. Today, we might have a data scientist sitting down, twirling his thumbs. I'm just being cheeky, but there's going to be a maturity that sort of starts to elevate as the function, as the practice, and as just the understanding. So that's one, a cultural revolution or a cognitive revolution, let's call it. Second is a technological revolution. This is where you sort of pointed a little bit to the idea of data lakes and all of that, and then what sits on top of it. I love that metaphor. And then the last is you'll see sort of law firms interacting with vendors who kind of have recommendation and insights really baked into everything. And somehow law firms, that's all three of those are going to kind of come together to, let's say, move the ball forward whenever it comes to data-driven law firms. And I think the last subtle part of that was you think that's going to happen maybe in in marketing and business development versus something else. What do you think? Good summary?
Yeah, I think so. I think I always break it down into two sides, right? I think you've got how AI, ML, whatever, can make the operational processes within a law firm smarter, more efficient, right? That, you go to any tech conference at the moment, and especially with relating to legal, and you look at who are there, and everything's about document automation, contract automation, it's about process automation. Yep. It's all about cutting out inefficiencies in the business of law, or the transactional business of law, right? And I think that doesn't go anywhere. I think how law firms use their data to better inform their strategies and make decisions is gonna be the biggest trend we see. And I think just understanding one area of the business, or just understanding financial performance, just isn't good enough anymore. And I think that's why all of the other factors I mentioned are coming to the surface, because everyone recognizes we just need to do things differently.
Yeah, totally. All right, I think we're going to open it up for some questions. Emma, I'm going to ask you to come back in here or go ahead in some reflections, or if anybody wants to make a comment, please go ahead and unmute yourself. We'd love to hear from you. We're going to go, open this up for just a couple more minutes. So I want to see, Emma, any questions that we want to go through, or anybody want to raise their hand and ask a question?
It's
insights?
been pretty quiet. You guys probably are answering everybody's questions before they even get a
Right, did
chance
such a
to
good job.
pop them in the chat. Obviously, when everyone gets the on-demand, they will have the opportunity to ask post-event questions, and we'll make sure that we get answers to them as they come in that way as well.
Awesome, fantastic. So if there's no questions, I guess James, let's leave us with a little bit of. I have a question, and I just can't help myself with which is Chat GPT-3. Do you want to talk about everybody's latest hype, or anything else that you're really excited about? Go ahead. Wax poetically about Chat GPT-3.
That Chat GPT-3 thing, right? It's I have one of my interns here who's phenomenally bright and is absolutely obsessed with it. And we've been looking for applications, of it in the work that we do. And all right, so as an example, one of the things that we do, we have an arm of our business that does research intelligence for law firms, right? It goes out to the market, it sources it publicly facing information, summarizes it, brings it back, annotates, et cetera, et cetera. Like we had a concept where we were going out and scraping information about, I guess, private equity portfolios and the companies that exist within those portfolios. And we were running it all through kind of like, chat to basically try and see if we could get it to summarize the output. And, actually it was pretty interesting.
Right.
It's actually in many ways, it's actually pretty terrifying. It's just we used it to basically go through tons and tons of scraped information and pull out what's important based on what we've sent it. And it managed to highlight probably 8 out of 10 of the most important KPIs that you would expect to see alongside a private equity portfolio. Which is phenomenal. It's phenomenal, and I know my guys are also using it to generate code to do specific things in Python when they just don't know it, and I know, changing the game, changing the game. It's terrifying.
That's but it's incredibly powerful. It is like everything today. The deepest, truthest things, a paradox, right? Both phenomenal and terrifying at the same time. I actually think we have 2 questions. One from Aaron Peterson, or Pedersen. Sorry, I hope I'm saying that correct, Aaron. So I'll read out the question, and then one from Paul as well. So the question from Aaron for you, James, is for those just entering an understanding of data science / analysis. What are your suggestions for starting routes to increase knowledge and how to apply it?
I think a decent grounding in technical languages is a great place to start. It's really interesting, right? There are a million different ways to skin a cat, right, when it relates to data science. But I would always say, if you don't know SQL, go and learn SQL, right? Certainly in our industry, and certainly in the majority of the industry, SQL is still relevant and always will be relevant, I think, for a long while. Even in the new world, with serverless SQL pools and all this kind of business, you still need to understand the basic syntax. So you're never going to be at a loss for understanding that. I think always start with that. I think the other side of it for me is actually, and I can probably circulate this afterwards, I have a list of people I follow on LinkedIn who at varying levels of their careers as it relates to data science, and they're all trying to solve the problem, or they're all trying to understand more about what they're trying to solve and what this discipline is and how it works. I would strongly advise you to become involved in following people like that, because they demystify this stuff, right? And the public, this public community that's growing is really helping. The only other thing I'd suggest is, and this is a bit of a cop out, but if they are useful, like Microsoft certifications in that space are actually phenomenal at grounding people, and actually they're free to learn. You just pay for the exams, unless you want to go to a classroom and be taught. And there's MS certifications for AI, there's MS certifications for engineering, there's this whole Azure spectrum. Now it is related to Azure specifically, but they're great places to start. That would be my advice.
Yes, my advice, again, just being ask ChatGPT-3 what would be the best way to get started. I bet they could summarize the entire internet for you. Okay, so one last question from Paul, and then we're going to wrap up. From Paul, for you, James, what firm data sources do you see as most valuable for BD and marketing and data? And then the second question is, and data science, ? So yeah, I think the question was really around sources good for BD, marketing, and then for data science in general. So what sources?
Practice management, without a doubt. or financial source of record, whatever you want to call it. You need to know how industries, clients, practice groups, you need to know how those things perform or have performed historically, because they do help to inform what is going to happen going forward. I think more often than not, actually, more CRM information is becoming incredibly relevant to BD and marketing. That sounds obvious, but historically the data quality was poor. Now it isn't.
Right.
So actually, it's really interesting. Like, people don't really want to understand opportunities won, lost. They want to understand why they lost them. They want to look for correlation between both positive and negative influences over their ability to grow revenue. CRM is an extremely decent place to hold that sort of stuff. Relationship intelligence is everywhere. It's only going to be more everywhere.
Right.
Everyone wants to know who knows who. They want to make sense of it. They want to tie it to their financials. They want to tie it to their performance, their ability to win things. In some cases, people are using it to assess lateral hires. Like, relationship intelligence is not going anywhere. And I think, there isn't really much of the data estate from a legal perspective that we can't do stuff with. That's the point, and I think, as to the question, I think those are the most relevant to marketing and BD. Maybe MPS if you track it, but not everyone does.
MPS.
But yeah.
Nice. All right, let's go ahead and wrap up. James, any final words?
No, I just think it's been really great to chat. It helps to get some of this out of my head, certainly.
Totally.
Yeah, it's been great. If anyone wants to connect or chat more, please reach out to me. And I'm sure we'll be doing something else in the future.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much to James. Here at Nexl, we're on a mission to change the way law firms grow, in part powered by revenue operations. Revenue operations is something that is totally educated by things like data science and all of the insights that derive out of that, and really operationalizing your revenue and how you go to market. So we want to thank Wilson Allen. We want to thank James, VP of Data Science at Wilson Allen, for all of the time. And if you'd like to learn more about revenue operations, head over to nexl.cloud/whitepaper, follow us on LinkedIn, and of course, please connect with James and Wilson Allen. Great partners of Nexl. Work hand in glove here on all of data science and all the rest of it. So thank you so much, everybody. We will be back very soon with another One Firm webinar, and we will be back with James probably over the course of the next year. We're really excited, maybe going intermediate or going a little bit deeper into relationship intelligence or advanced projects. So we're really excited. So James, thank you so much again.
No problem. Happy to be here.